I'm an Amazon delivery driver and have been for a little over a year. I drive one of the Amazon trucks and deliver to several neighborhoods in a particular city. I deliver to both houses and apartments, and overall I enjoy it. Things are usually pretty easy because I don't have to drive on some of the very narrow roads. Anyways, the story I want to talk about happened roughly 6 months ago. So I'd been on the job for about 6 months and had gotten used to most things. There was this one neighborhood that I had been delivering to on many days. I would describe it as a very typical neighborhood. There were houses on both sides of the street with nice front yards and driveways. I would park on the side of the road and deliver to the houses and slowly make my ways down. On most days, I would say at least 10 of the houses had Amazon packages to be delivered. Some houses would obviously get packages almost every day. So one day, I got about halfway down the street and I parked my truck to deliver to one house in particular. When I got out of the truck, I went to walk up the driveway and leave the package at the front step. I knew that I had delivered to this house several times before and I recognized it. As I was walking up the driveway, I saw this man standing in the garage next to the house. The garage door was open and there was also a car inside. The man was watching me and I thought about going and handing him the package. However, as I continued to walk up the driveway, he looked away and then he walked farther into the garage and kind of out of sight. Then I just went to the front step, set the package down, and then headed back to my truck. I remember when I was getting back to my truck, I saw the guy staring at me again. I didn't really think too much of this whole thing, but I mentioned that because something strange happened soon after. I remember that I continued with my route for the day. I was out delivering packages, and when I got off, I drove the truck back to the Amazon warehouse. After parking the truck, I went inside, and a short time later, I headed out to my car to drive home. When I got inside my car in the parking lot though, I saw this other car parked a ways across from me. I don't know how I noticed this, because the car's lights were off, and it wasn't like directly in front of me or anything. But I saw that there was a man in the driver's seat of the car, and he was looking at me. I was sure that it was the same guy who I had seen in the garage. It took me like 5 seconds to remember that. When I saw him, I knew he looked familiar, but I couldn't tell from what. Then I realized. I was very confused though as to why he would be there. I sat in my car for a short time, wanting to see what the guy was doing. He appeared to just be sitting in his car. I couldn't really tell if he was looking over at me, but it kinda seemed like it. After I sat there for like 2 or 3 minutes, I remember seeing the lights to his car suddenly turn on and then he drove away. I was a little creeped out by this. Then I just drove home though. I didn't know what else to do. Now, for a few days, I did not deliver to that house. Then, probably 3 days later, I did have another delivery there. I left my truck and started walking up the driveway again. This time, the garage door was closed and I did not see the man staring at me or anything. But when I got to the front door, there was a note taped to it. The note said, "Please deliver package inside the house." I didn't really know if I should, but after thinking for a few seconds, I decided to. I thought that maybe they had had a problem with people stealing packages or something, and if this one got stolen, I might get in trouble for not delivering it even though I had. I don't really know, but that's what I was thinking at the time. I opened the door and it was unlocked. It looked like a pretty typical entryway of a house. But then I saw another note taped to a wall straight inside the house. This one said, "Deliver package that way," with an arrow pointing to the right. This was just too weird. I just laid the package down right inside the door and then turned around and left. I went back to my truck and continued on. After that, I didn't get any more package deliveries to that house. But something else that's weird is I would still drive down that street for other deliveries. Like a week or so after the incident, I remember seeing 2 police cars parked on the side of the road in front of that house. I'm not sure what it was about, but I think that guy seemed really sketchy. Like 2 weeks later, my route changed. I haven't been back there since. I'm not sure what the deal was with that guy, but he certainly gave me the creeps. Something really creepy happened to me last month. I live in an apartment building. It's pretty standard for the most part. The place is nice and most of the residents seem nice as well. It's not a dumpy place or anything, but it's not the greatest in the world either. I've lived here for almost 2 years and it's been good. There's a mailroom just inside the doors on the first floor where we get packages and stuff. I order things online all the time and I have an Amazon Prime account that I use a lot. It's very convenient because you can get next day deliveries sometimes. I remember that my coffee maker broke one day and I decided to order a new one. I drink coffee quite a bit, especially in the mornings before work. so I found one on Amazon for next day delivery. I saw when I was at work the next day that it had been delivered, and I went down to the mailroom when I got back home from work. However, when I arrived in the mailroom, I couldn't find my package. There's usually a lot of packages in the mailroom, but I looked at each and every one of them, and mine was not there. I didn't know if somebody had took it by mistake or what, because it said that it had been delivered. So I went back up to my apartment, and I was going on Amazon trying to figure out how to get my money back or something. Then, suddenly, there was a knock on my door. This was nighttime, so I didn't know who could be there. I got up and walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I opened up the door out of curiosity. There, sitting on the ground, was my coffee maker. I picked it up and was just so confused. I brought it inside and saw that the box was already open. The coffee maker was inside of it, but I had no clue why it was left on my doorstep now. After thinking about it for a while, the only thing I could think of was that somebody else took it by mistake. Maybe they thought it was theirs and opened it and then realized that it wasn't theirs. I really didn't know. That didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but I couldn't think of any other logical explanation. I also didn't know who had done it. I decided not to contact Amazon or anything. I figured this was just a freak thing and it wouldn't happen again. And at the end of the day, I had gotten my coffee maker like I had ordered. After a few days, I pretty much forgot about it. I used the coffee maker and it worked fine and everything. Well, sometime the next week, I ordered something on Amazon again. This time, it was skincare stuff. I went down to the mailroom to get the package when I got home from work again. It said that it was delivered. So when I looked in the mailroom, once more, I could not find it. When I looked at every package there and none of them had my name on it, I remembered back to the last time. I thought to myself, this better not have happened again. I went back up to my apartment and really did not know what to do. Sure enough though, later on in the night there was a knock at my door. I quickly went over to it and opened it. Whoever had knocked was gone, but my skincare products were also not outside the door. Instead, there was a note there. I picked it up and read it. It said, "To get your package, come to 112. That was the number of another unit on my floor. I didn't know all my neighbors or who exactly lived in 112, but I now knew who was stealing my packages. I did not go to the room to get it. Instead, I reported it to management of the apartment building. They ended up investigating by looking at the security footage. A guy who I had seen around a few times but never spoke to was the culprit. It showed him taking both my packages back to his apartment, then putting the things on my front step. He ended up getting evicted for it. Why he did that, I don't know. This is something that happened last summer. I live in a house with my wife and 2 daughters. My oldest daughter is 19 and she was home from college at the time. My youngest is 16 and in high school. Between the 4 of us living at the house, we order things online a good amount. It seems like every other day there's an Amazon package on the front step or something like that. So one night I remember that I was up a little bit later than usual. Both the girls were in their bedrooms upstairs and my wife had just gone up to bed. I was about to go upstairs, but I decided to load the dishwasher first to let it run overnight. After doing so, I was passing by the living room at the front of the house. I heard the sound of a car door closing in the otherwise quiet night. It got my attention and I glanced out the window to see a man come into view. This guy was walking in front of the house and then he started to go into our driveway. I didn't see the vehicle that he had come from my view, but I did see that the man was wearing a blue Amazon vest and he was also carrying a package. Now, I hadn't ordered anything, but I figured that either my wife or one of my daughters had. However, the strange thing is that it was 11:30 at night. I know Amazon delivers a lot, but I didn't think that they had deliveries in the middle of the night like this. Still, it was very possible, so I honestly didn't think too much of it. I was just about to go upstairs as I was standing at the base of them, but for some reason, I just decided to look out of the window to the man. When I did, he did not seem to notice me at all because the lights inside were out, and he walked up to the front door. However, he did not just put the package on the front step and then walk away like I thought he would. He stayed on the front step, which was out of my sight, for sort of a long time. Obviously, he did not knock on the door or ring the bell or anything. After like 15 seconds of him being on the front step, I got curious. I moved over to the window to see what the man would do. When I finally got a view of him, I saw him still holding the package, seemingly looking around, and then he moved away from the front step. Then he walked around to the side of the house. By this point, I was getting suspicious. After going out of my sight again, I went around the house to figure out where the guy had gone. I looked out of a side window but did not see him there. Then I thought I heard footsteps of somebody moving outside. They were towards the back of the house, and I walked over towards the dining room, which was at the back of the house. When I made my way there, I saw out of one of the back windows the man walk by for just a split second. Then I looked over to the back door and he came into view. I quickly ran over and turned on the light to the back. When I did, I saw the man then suddenly turn and quickly start running away. He took the Amazon package with him and went all the way back around the house. The guy did not stop until he went back off our property and into the street. I didn't get a good look at the car that he went into because we had a large tree in the way, but I did hear him get inside and start the engine, and then he drove away. I realized then that the man likely did not work for Amazon. It was most likely just a disguise to look like a regular delivery driver if anybody happened to notice him. I know that a lot of people work for Amazon and deliver at all kinds of times, but still I think people should always be aware of their surroundings and not get complacent. I went to bed after that, and the next day I told my wife and daughters about it. None of them were expecting an Amazon package to arrive overnight. It's very creepy to think of what might have happened had I not stayed up late that night. This is something that happened about 2 years ago. I was in college at the time, living in this old 2-bedroom beat-up house. I lived with my roommate named Robbie Anderson. We both worked part-time jobs as well as had classes at all random times, so I didn't see Robbie really that much. We were friends though, but not like best friends or anything. So one evening, Robbie was gone at work. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and I was inside watching On Patrol Live on TV. The living room was at the front of the house, so I could see out of it pretty good. I remember noticing something out of the corner of my eye. I looked over and saw this random guy who I didn't know just walking right into our front yard. This looked very suspicious to me. The guy walked up to the front door and then started to try to open it. Now, there were 2 doors there. The first was a screen door, and the second was the much stronger and solid regular door, so you would have to open up one and then the other to get inside. Both of these happened to be locked though, as we did not live in the safest neighborhood. I instantly got up from the couch and walked over to the door. After the guy tried to open the first door, he then knocked on it. I made my way over there and I opened up the first door. When I did, I saw the man standing there before me. He had a pretty large build, was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and had brown hair. I said in a borderline rude way, "What do you want?" The man said that he was from Amazon and he was there to deliver a package. I said, "Well, where is it?" The guy didn't have anything with him. He said that it was back in his truck, and it was policy that I had to sign for it first and then he would go and get it. I knew that I hadn't ordered anything on Amazon, and I told the man that. The guy then asked me if anybody else lived there, and I said, "What's it to you?" He claimed that he was supposed to deliver the package. It seemed sketchy, and I doubted that Robbie had ordered something like that. The man then ordered me to open the door so I could sign for the package. He said that it was very large and expensive, and I needed to help him get it out of his truck. I told him to get lost, and then I slammed the door in his face. The guy stood there for a moment, and then I heard him loudly curse at me a few times. Then he walked back through the yard and left. After he was out of my sight, I called Robbie and told him about it. Robbie confirmed that he had not ordered anything. I was glad that I didn't open the door for that guy. I mean, he wasn't even wearing anything that indicated he worked for Amazon, and he didn't even have a package with him. It was about as sketchy as can be. After that, I didn't see that guy again for the time that we lived there. I used to work at Amazon for a while. I worked in the warehouse, and I would do things like pack orders and receive inventory, among other things. The coworkers that I worked with were mostly cool. I didn't have a problem with any of them, until that all changed. So I remember that I had this one coworker named Mark. I never really talked to him that much. Overall, he seemed fine and just like everyone else. So one night, I got off of work and left. I drove home, which would take about 15 minutes. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until I was almost back. The roads had been pretty quiet because of it being a little bit later. However, I did not notice anything strange. After I got to the parking lot of my apartment, I got out of my car. I recall noticing a car pulling into the other side of the parking lot, but I didn't really think much of it. It's a fairly large apartment complex with quite a few people who live there, and the parking lot is pretty big too. The car parked on the far opposite end. Then I walked towards the building and then went inside. After that, I walked down the hallway and went up the stairs to my floor. My apartment building was not the nicest and sort of run down. When I got up to my floor, I walked to my room. However, as I was doing this, I heard the door to the stairs opening behind me. I still thought nothing of it. It was a ways back and I couldn't see the person in my view at that point. After unlocking my door, I heard footsteps in the hallway, but I didn't look. Then I went inside, closed the door behind me, and locked it like I always did. Now, not even 10 seconds after I had locked the door, somebody tried opening it. I was still standing nearby, and it really surprised me. I stepped over and looked through the peephole. When I did, I saw Mark from work at Amazon standing there. I was surprised to say the least. I didn't know what on earth he was doing there. For a moment, I was thinking about opening the door, but I decided not to. Then Mark walked away out of sight. At that point, I did open the door. He was a ways away now, and as he was still walking away, after I looked outside and he heard the door open, he turned back. I called out his name, and I was starting to ask him what he was doing here. As soon as he saw me though, he just turned and ran. He sprinted down the rest of the hallway and out of my sight. It was really weird. The next day when I got to work, I asked if Mark was there, and I was told no. I told my supervisor about what had happened, and he said that he was going to talk to Mark. However, Mark never showed up. He must have quit the job, because I never saw him again after that. I only worked there a few more months. I also do not live in that same apartment anymore. Looking back, I realized that Mark must have followed me home without me noticing. I'm not really sure how I didn't notice, but I just didn't. I think he got in the building because people were always propping the doors open with stuff, and I'm not even sure if some of the doors locked properly or closed properly. It was kind of a rundown place, and I'm glad I don't live there anymore. It was a very creepy experience, and I'm really glad that I locked my apartment door when I did. I don't know what could have happened if not. I've been a mailman for almost 10 years. For the past few years, I've had a walking route that I do every day. I live by the city, so there are some very large neighborhoods that I deliver mail to. I have a route that I go on, and I walk from one house to another with my large mail bag, dropping off the mail for each address. When the weather is nice, I really enjoy it because I get lots of good exercise from walking so much. In my entire time working the job, I've never been scared of anything, not even dogs. And that's mainly because I deliver in the morning time and not at night or anything. But one day, that all changed. I was delivering on my route through a very large neighborhood. There were tons of houses all pretty close to each other. So I was on the route, and at one point I came up to a house just like any other. The houses around there did not have mailboxes down by the street, but would instead be up next to the door of the house. So I walked up the steps to the front porch area with the mail ready to put it in the box. When I got there, I saw that the main door to the house was open and just the screen door was closed, so I could kind of see inside. There was a man standing not far away from the front door, and he looked over at me as I was walking up the steps. I just kind of nodded hello to him, and he seemed kind of surprised to see me. He didn't really react though, and then I stepped up towards the mailbox. However, when I was about to put the mail in, the man from inside suddenly spoke. He said, "Hey, can you just bring the mail inside here quick?" I said sure, and I opened the front door and stepped inside the house. After getting in, I saw the man, who was pretty tall and also large. He told me to set it on the kitchen table, which was about 10 feet away. I walked over and set the mail down, but as I was doing so, I heard the front door closing. I looked over and saw the man standing directly in front of it and facing me. He had a very serious and almost angry look on his face. Then I heard another man's voice from down the hallway somewhere in the house yell, "What's going on over there?" I was confused but just wanted to leave and continue with my route. I started walking over to the man standing in front of the door. He wasn't moving at all though. Then I heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. I looked over and saw another man come walking into the room. He saw me and said, "The mailman." "No." I looked around and asked if I could leave. The big guy said to me, "No, you ain't leaving." I had a bad feeling, and I had had a bad feeling ever since the guy shut the door. I looked around and saw a back door. It was kind of just an instinct, but I took off and started running for it. As soon as I did, both men started to chase after me. I was able to make it to the door, but when I stopped to open it, the smaller man caught up to me and tackled me to the ground. There was a brief struggle, and the big guy came over there as well. Honestly, my mind kind of went blank, and I don't fully remember what happened. I just know that somehow I was able to fight them off just long enough to get up and make it out the door. I took off running outside, and the men briefly chased after me, but I was faster than them, and I ran down the street far away. When I realized they were not chasing me anymore, I stopped and I called the police. Then I waited there for them to arrive. They went to the house, but the men were gone. It turns out, though, that neither of the men owned the house. They had broken in and were robbing it. That made a little more sense to me as to what happened. I had been very confused. Despite being shaken up, though, I was thankfully not injured and was able to continue with my route for the day. Several days later, the police located the men who had done a string of robberies in the area. Looking back, I'm really glad that I made it out of there okay, and I'm glad that the men were caught. Something really strange and creepy happened to me once. This was back about 25 years ago or so. At the time, it was just my husband and I living in our house. We lived in a neighborhood with many other houses on it, but it was generally pretty quiet, especially at night. I remember one evening around 7 or 8 p.m., I was looking out of our front window for whatever reason. I noticed that there was a mail truck parked on the side of the road on the other side of the street. I didn't know what it was doing there. We had already received the mail earlier that day, plus something about the truck looked off, like the mail logo wasn't quite correct looking. To me, it seemed kind of suspicious. I didn't see anybody get out of it though, and I couldn't quite tell if anybody was inside. Several hours later and I looked again, and the truck was still there. I found that to be very odd. Our street was not really the type that would have cars parked on the side of it a whole lot. There wasn't really much that I could do about it though. I know by the next morning, the truck was gone. So really I forgot about it until the next night though. This time, the truck came back again. It was later than before though. I was passing by the front window at probably 10 o'clock at night or so, maybe later. I noticed that the same mail truck was stopped on the side of the street. This time though, I saw movement in the driver's area. Then the door opened and a man got out. He was wearing a jacket and a hat, as well as sunglasses and a backpack. It looked sort of strange. Then he walked up into the yard of the people who lived across the street from us. I watched as he went up to their front step, and then he kind of got out of my view. I knew he didn't live there, but I thought maybe he knew the neighbors and was visiting. Still, I kept watching though. Soon the man appeared again walking down the yard. Then he crossed the street and entered our front yard. I quickly ducked down from the window. The man walked all the way up and then got to our front step. I could hear him there. There was a brief 2 knocks at the door before he turned and quickly walked away. I peeked out of the window to see the man walking back down, and then I saw him go into the next door neighbor's property. I then went and told my husband about what was going on. When he came to look though, the man was out of sight. His mail truck was still there though. My husband got curious and decided to go outside. I didn't know what he was going to do, and I told him not to go after the guy or anything because he might be dangerous. But when my husband opened the door, he realized that there was something on our front step. It was a single VHS tape. He brought it inside and showed it to me. This was a long time ago, so of course we had a VCR. We were both very curious as to what was on the tape, because it had no label or anything. We put the tape in the VCR and pressed play. It started out looking like a home video taken from a video camera, and it was showing out the windshield of a car driving down the road at night. There were no sounds other than the driving sounds. This continued for about probably 5 minutes. Then the camera turned, and we could see part of the man's face. He was still wearing sunglasses and a hat though, and only like half of his face was visible in the frame. He then started laughing in a really creepy way. This continued for an uncomfortable amount of time. It was enough to give my husband and I the creeps. Then it abruptly stopped. That was all that was on the tape. We looked outside and the guy was still gone. We thought about calling the cops, but decided not to. A while later, the man returned to his mail truck vehicle and left. It looked as though maybe he was giving the videotapes to everybody who lived on our street. Why though, I have no idea. After that night, he never came back. I never found out who the guy was or why he did that. Maybe it was just a strange and creepy prank. Either way, it really freaked me out. I used to work at a post office for a few years. I have one story of something really crazy and almost unbelievable that happened. So the post office that I worked at was fairly large. We were near a big city and would get a good amount of customers. Many people would come in to ship packages and things like that. Some people also had mailboxes with us there. I worked behind the counter helping customers, and then I would work in the back organizing packages and other parcels as well. One evening I was working with my coworker Andrea. The two of us were working until past close, which was 6 p.m. So overall, things were pretty quiet that day. We had a few people come in here and there for whatever reason. By 5:30, things were very quiet. Andrea went into the back to do some work, and I stayed by the counter in case we got any more customers. Then, literally 5 minutes before closing time, this guy came in. He was wheeling in this really large box that was all taped up. He had one of those dollies that he was wheeling it in on. The man came up to me at the counter and said that he would like to mail the box. I told him sure, and I weighed and measured the box with the guy. It was really heavy, about 150 pounds, and I told the guy the price, which was pretty expensive. He gave me the address he was mailing it to, and the man then told me that inside of it was expensive gym equipment. Then I wheeled the package into the back, and the man left. Right after he left, I locked the doors, and we were closed. Then I went into the back with Andrea to finish working. We had some things to do, such as organizing parcels and whatnot. I remember that after about 20 or 30 minutes, we were just about done. I turned off some of the lights, and Andrea and I were talking a little bit near the doors right before leaving. Other than that, things were completely silent. Then, out of nowhere, we heard this sound. We were the only two there, so we had no clue as to what it could be. We walked over and looked to where the sound was coming from. The next thing we knew, we saw this guy inside the back room of the post office. He was standing up and fairly short and thin, wearing all black, and also had a ski mask on so we couldn't see his face. I had no idea where he had come from. Then I noticed the large box that the man had dropped off was wide open. The man had been inside of it. Neither of us knew what to do. The man just stood there for a moment, and then he started walking towards the front. He went over and left through the front door, leaving the post office entirely. Andrea called the police. She reported what happened, and we stayed there for a while, not knowing what was going on. When things finally calmed down, though, we were able to realize more of what had happened. There were surveillance tapes inside the post office. They would not get the identity of the man who was in the box because he had a mask on, but we did have the identity of the guy who tried to mail it. A few days later, I found out that they located both men. They had a plan to get the smaller guy in the post office, and then he was going to steal a bunch of packages, I guess. He was planning to leave the box after Andrea and I left, so he would have the whole mailroom to himself. However, he got hot and uncomfortable in the box, and also didn't hear very well from inside of it. He knew he was getting mailed right before we closed, so he figured that we had left already. Fortunately, we had not. That was by far the craziest thing that ever happened when I worked at the post office. A couple of years back, I lived in this one apartment building. I had a place on the first floor, and the complex was pretty average, I would say. I only lived there for a year, but towards the end of my lease, something strange happened. Most days, I would go down to the mailroom to check my mail. Because I was on the first floor, it wasn't that far of a walk, which was nice. One time, though, I saw that I had a letter in my mail. It had no return address, but was addressed to me, and it looked to be handwritten. I was curious, but thought maybe it was still an advertisement. I didn't know who would write me a physical letter, because most people just reach out online or over text. I had seen some of those spam mail letters that look like they're handwritten so that you'll read them, but then it's all just a scam. So I took the letter back to my apartment and opened it. Inside, it was not an ad but a written letter. However, it was very strange. It didn't really make much sense to me. The letter just said, "Hi, how are you?" and then said my name. Then it said, "Expect more mail from me soon." And that was it. The rest of the letter was blank. I had no idea who would send this to me or why. I just threw it away at that point. It seemed stupid. After that, though, maybe 2 days later, there was a small package for me in the mailroom. I hadn't ordered anything that I could recall, so I brought it to my place to see what it was. When I opened the box, it was completely empty. I didn't know what on earth was going on. Was somebody messing with me? Why? Then, several days after this, I got another package. Based on the handwriting of the address, it appeared to be from the same person again. This time, it was not empty, but had all these little fake spiders in it. It was gross. I disposed of that as well, and did not know what to make of this. I didn't really have any friends with that kind of a sense of humor. So, for a few days, I got nothing else. Then, I got another letter in the mail. This one said, "How are you enjoying my gifts to you?" Well, I could not answer them because I had no idea who was sending these things to me. By that point, I didn't have much longer in my lease. I wanted to move out as soon as possible. I got one more package from the person. This one was filled with candy hearts, but they were not in the package. Whoever sent this literally took several bags of candy hearts probably and dumped them straight into the box. And the box was basically completely full of them. It was so weird. I threw those away as well. After that, I only lived in the apartment for about another week. I never did find out who was behind those or why. Thankfully, at my new place, I haven't received any strange letters or packages. I work for the U.S. Postal Service and am a mailman. I drive a mail delivery truck every day and deliver mail to houses as well as some apartments and businesses. I've had several different routes over the years. My craziest experience happened about 2 years ago now. My route at that time took me through this pretty nice neighborhood at one point. It wasn't like a super wealthy neighborhood or anything, but I just thought that it was a nice neighborhood. It had decent houses on both sides of the street, and it was never that crowded or busy overall. I enjoyed driving there, and the people seemed to be pretty nice. So one morning, I was making my deliveries. I would drive right up to the mailboxes and then just put the parcels right in the box and then continue on. So I reached one mailbox and I saw the house up ahead that would be the next one had a fairly short driveway and the garage door was open. As I finished putting the mail in the box that I was at, I slowly proceeded to the next mailbox. As I was doing so, I saw a man walking out from the garage of the house ahead, and he walked down the driveway towards the mailbox. The man had a beard, sort of long hair, and I remember that he was barefoot. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt though. He approached me as I was about to put the mail in his box. He told me that he would just take it and held out his hands. So I gave him the mail and told him to have a nice day, and then I drove on to the next house. I continued with my route and didn't really think anything more of it. The next day, just about the same thing happened. The guy, who was once again barefoot, walked down the driveway and took the mail directly from me. Then he walked back up the driveway and into the garage. I had never seen the guy before, but I didn't really pay that much attention to who lived where. I delivered to a ton of houses in the area. The next day though, I got called by my supervisor and told that someone on my route was not receiving their mail. I was very confused because I knew that I had delivered to every address. I had been doing the job long enough to be confident that I had not made a mistake. I found out where exactly I was told they weren't getting their mail. I realized it was the barefoot guy who I had been handing the mail to. This made me angry because I was literally handing the mail right to the guy. I told my boss this, and he said that he would get back to me. A short time later, he told me that the homeowner never accepted the mail directly from me, and nobody else lived there. He told me that the guy who lived there is gone at work all day when the mail arrives. I was confused and thought that maybe his neighbor was stealing his mail or something. The next day at my route, I did not see the barefoot guy. I put the mail in the box and continued. Later on, I found out some crazy information from my boss. He told me that the guy who lived there said that a man had been secretly living in his garage without him knowing. After he heard about me handing the mail to a guy coming out of his garage, he went into the garage to look around. Apparently, that's when he found the guy living there. I guess the man rarely used his garage and hadn't been in it in weeks. After he saw the guy, he called the police, and the man was arrested for trespassing, and his mail was also in the garage. It was the craziest thing I ever heard. I was also relieved that I hadn't done anything wrong and wasn't in trouble. The guy who lived there actually called me personally to thank me, which I thought was really nice. At the end of the day, I'm really glad that I was able to help, and that the man living in the garage was caught without causing any major problems. That's been my craziest experience as a mailman.
Last summer, I worked as an Amazon delivery driver for a few months. The job started out well. It was good money for me, and at first I really liked it. But over time, I got tired of driving around all day. The job just wasn't for me. I remember that towards the end of it, something happened as well that led to me ultimately quitting. It was a typical weekday, and I started in the morning to begin my shift. First, I delivered packages to a neighborhood in one area, then moved to another. It was a neighborhood, and I had a lot of houses to go to in it. I spent an hour there total. There was tons of houses there, and I made a bunch of deliveries. I left the neighborhood for the next one on my route for that particular day. To get there, it took between 5 and 10 minutes. In doing so, when I merged onto a busier road, this was the first time I noticed the car behind me. It was an orange and black car. The hood and the front half of the car was orange, and the back half was black. It looked like a custom paint job. The car was following me super close, probably less than a car length. I just remember thinking that they seemed like a crazy driver. The road only had one lane, so they were stuck behind me. When I turned onto another road where there were now 2 lanes, the car remained behind me and didn't pass. In fact, It followed me all the way to the next neighborhood that I would be making deliveries in. I began to feel a little unsure of the situation, but when I got to the first street and parked for the first delivery, the car behind me parked on the side of the road a ways back. I was able to deliver the package, and the car stayed there the whole time. I went on with my deliveries, and soon I moved out of view of that car. It stayed in the same spot on the side of the road. Some time went by, and I was busy working. I soon forgot about the black and orange car, only until I saw it again later in the day, and I quickly remembered everything. I was making more deliveries of Amazon packages, and I saw the car parked on the side of the street. I was in another fairly standard neighborhood. I thought that it was really strange to see the car again, but it didn't follow me as I was making deliveries or anything. I also did not see who was driving the car at any point. So I worked for the rest of the day, and it was pretty uneventful. I didn't see the car at all for the final 2 hours or so. Then I was finally done for the day. I drove the truck back to the Amazon warehouse, and soon I could drive home. I got in my car and began going back to my apartment about 10 minutes away. But less than a minute into the drive home, and I spotted the car again. There was no mistaking it. How many half-orange and half-black cars are out there on the road? The car was once again driving behind me. I was freaked out now, knowing it had been around me almost the entire day. I had never seen this car before either, until today. I didn't know who it was, or what it was that they wanted. As I drove home, the car started following me extremely close again. The closer I got to my place, the more concerned I was. When it came time for me to drive into my apartment parking lot, I was very scared. The parking lot was sort of big and had a few different sections. I tried driving around the place, but the car parked not long after entering. It was almost as if they knew this was my place. I then had a crazy thought that maybe this was just a huge coincidence and the driver of the car lived there, but then I realized that I had never seen it here before, and seeing the car all day was just too crazy. I kept driving and parked just about as far away from the car as I could. I very carefully made my way to my apartment building, and I was able to get inside and up to my apartment okay. When I got inside my apartment, the first thing I did was go over to the window and look outside. My window overlooked much of the parking lot, and I could still see the car sitting there. I waited and kept watching, but I never saw anybody get out. I could tell somebody was inside, but I couldn't see any details of them at all. The car remained there for about 20 minutes. Then, I watched it back up and drive away. After that one day in particular, I never saw it again. I still don't know who was in that car and why they followed me. Something was definitely up, but I really don't know what. I didn't work at Amazon for much longer after that. I live by myself in a 2-story house that's in the suburbs. Like many people, I order Amazon packages all the time. I go on Amazon to buy almost anything I need that I either can't get in stores or are just too lazy to. A couple of months ago, I was home and inside my house when there was a random knock at the front door. It was like a fast 2 knocks. I walked over, taking my time, and when I arrived at the front door, I opened it to see nobody there. However, there was an Amazon package on the front step. It was a rather large box, and I looked over and saw an Amazon truck driving away. I thought to myself for a moment on what this was. I really didn't remember ordering anything, much less something so big. I picked up the box and took it inside. When I looked at it, sure enough, it was addressed to me. They certainly hadn't delivered it to the wrong house like I thought might be a possibility. I was now really curious, and I opened up the box. Inside of it was a large teddy bear. It was honestly huge. I was very confused by this because I knew that I hadn't ordered it. I then logged onto my Amazon account and looked at my recent purchases. I was afraid that I had maybe gotten hacked, but everything appeared normal. It only showed the purchases that I knew I had made. I even checked my bank account and recent purchases, and still, everything seemed normal. It was a mystery to me, but possibly somebody that I knew had ordered it to my house for me. If you have an Amazon account, all you really need is a name and address, and you can have anything sent to anybody. I tried thinking of somebody who would maybe send it to me, but I couldn't think of anyone. It seemed like a really random thing. All I could do was wonder about it. But the very next day, when I got home, I saw another Amazon package on my front step. This one was smaller than the previous one. I also knew that I hadn't ordered this either. I was really curious again, so I opened it up, and this time it was a box of fancy chocolates. It appeared as though I had a secret admirer, but I had no clue who it could possibly be. I wasn't sure whether to be happy or feel creeped out. 2 days later, I got another Amazon package. This time, it was another teddy bear, but a smaller one. I was wondering how many of these packages I was going to get, and I was dying to know who was doing this. But then, things took a really weird turn. That night, when I was home, I was in the living room, and all of the curtains were covering the windows. It was probably about 10 p.m., and I saw the shadow of somebody walking right past the front window outside. Whoever it was had to be walking right up next to the window, and as soon as I saw it, my heart started racing. I remembered all of the packages, and I knew instantly that there had to be a connection. The person was headed to the side of my house, whoever it was. I walked over there, which is where my bedroom was, and I opened the door, just in time to see somebody running off outside of my bedroom window. I didn't get a good look at them at all. They were kind of a blur as they ran off in the distance. I went over to the window and looked out, but they were long gone by then. I couldn't figure out where they had gone to. In my entire time living there, I had never seen anybody running through my yard before. After that night, I never got any more packages. I don't know who it was, but I think it was the person who was in my yard that night. This happened a year and a half ago. I live alone in a house, and this took place on a random weeknight. The sun had just recently set, and it was the evening, but I don't remember the exact time. I know I was in my bedroom though, when I heard a knocking on the front door. I got up and walked out to look and see who was there. Before I could get to the front of the house, there was another knock though. I then looked out the front window at the step. There was a man standing there in an Amazon hat, holding a package. I was about to go over and open the door without giving it a second thought, but I realized that I didn't remember ordering anything on Amazon recently. I really didn't know what it could be. For some reason, I decided to not open the door. I figured that the man would just leave the package at the doorstep and then walk away. He kept standing there though, and then he knocked another time. It was dark out, so I didn't have a good look at him at all. Plus, his hat didn't allow me to get a good look at his face. He seemed sort of big though. I was watching him from the front window, and he would not have a good view of it at all. I was also very careful that he didn't see me. The man kept standing there for over a minute before knocking yet again. He then looked around, and I ducked down from my spot. I decided then to just walk away. I went back to my bedroom, but when I got there, I heard even more knocking from the front door. Finally, it stopped. Several minutes went by, and I thought that the man had left. I came out of my bedroom to check, because I was really curious as to what the package was that I had received. I decided to check out the window again just to be safe, but when I did, the guy was still standing there. I couldn't believe it. Didn't he have other deliveries to make? I really didn't know why he was out delivering this late anyways. He had probably been at my house for almost 10 minutes at that point. I kept watching him. Now I was really curious. The guy was just standing there and looking around, like he knew that I was home and he was just waiting for me to answer the door. A few more minutes went by. He knocked very loudly one more time and yelled, "Amazon package." The man then set the box on the front step a couple of feet away from the door. Then he started to walk away, but he didn't go very far. I watched him go around the corner and then stop. I could barely see him, but he hadn't left. He was standing in front of my garage, kind of out of view of the front step though. I thought about retrieving the package, but I wasn't going to with this guy waiting right there. It seemed really suspicious. I decided not to get it, and I kept watching the man instead. He remained there for the longest time. It had to be at least 5 minutes. Then I watched the man appear again completely from around the corner. He grabbed the package and picked it up. He walked away down the driveway and into the street. The way he picked up the package, it seemed extremely light. I wouldn't doubt if nothing was in the box at all. I think that it was some type of setup, and I'm really glad that I didn't answer the door.
Lately, I've had a few strange occurrences with a mail truck in my neighborhood. This all started just about 2 weeks ago. I live in what I would say is a pretty average neighborhood. There's a bunch of houses on my street, and I live on the third house from the end. One night, I was up late playing video games, and after finally getting really sleepy, I decided to go to bed. I moved from where I was in the living room to go to my bedroom. When I did this, I turned off the living room lights, and when this happened, I looked out the window to the front yard, which was much more visible now. I saw that right in front of my yard, parked on the side of the street, was a mail truck. It looked just like any typical mail truck used by the post office to deliver the daily mail. The strange part about this was that it was past 1 o'clock in the morning. Plus, my street wasn't all that busy, and cars parked in front of my house were rare. I didn't know anybody who worked at the post office either, so I was confused as to why there was a truck parked outside my house. I stood there, peeking outside the window for at least 10 minutes, watching the truck. I couldn't tell at all who was inside from my angle, but eventually, I saw the truck creep forward and drive until it was about even with my mailbox. Then, it stopped for about a minute, and then drove away. I was feeling really curious what the mailman was doing out there, and I decided to go check my mailbox. It looked like maybe he had put something inside of it, so I walked outside down my driveway, checked my street to make sure the mail truck was really gone, and then opened up my mailbox. Inside of it, there was a small package. I took it out and went inside. When I looked at the package, I saw that there was no stamp on it or anything, just a completely blank box. I opened up the box and was really curious to see what was inside of it, but when I did, the box was empty, nothing inside of it at all. I was really weirded out by this, but ended up just going to bed after that. Just a couple of nights later, I was up late once again. This time, I was sitting on my couch when I heard the sound of a car driving on the street in front of my house. I happened to look out at it and see that it was a mail truck. I looked at the clock, and it was almost 2 in the morning this time. I remembered the other night. It had to be the same truck, but why was it out this late? The truck once again slowed down and came to a stop right in front of my house. This time, the lights in my house were already off. I watched from my front window, careful so that I couldn't be seen. The mail truck sat once again for several minutes without anything happening. This time, the engine seemed to shut off. A few seconds later, I watched a driver emerge from the truck. It was a man, and he was not wearing a mail outfit, but instead, a black t-shirt and jeans. He began walking up into my front yard. There was a path from my driveway to the front door, but this guy didn't seem to be walking to my front door, but more right towards the living room window that I was at. I reached over to the light switch and turned on the living room light. When it went on, I watched the guy turn around and then run back to his truck. He then started the engine and drove away. After that, I haven't seen him since. However, that was only a little bit over a week ago. I would really like to know what that guy was doing. This story occurred many years ago when I was a kid. I was probably about 8 years old, and I remember that one day I went with my mother to go to the post office. She had to send something in the mail, and I don't remember what it was exactly, but I think it was a bigger package, so we had to go to the post office to mail it. It was pretty rare for us to go to the post office, and I always thought it was kind of interesting. When we got there, I remembered that it was really busy. We lived in the city, so the local post office usually had a line of people, and my mother and I got in the end of the line and began waiting. I waited in line with my mother for a while, but I got bored the longer we waited. Eventually, it was my mother's turn, and she began to talk with somebody at the front counter. It took a little longer than I thought it would, and I wandered off to look at some of the things around the post office. It was a pretty interesting one. They had sort of displays and a lot of posters on the wall of information and things like that, probably because it was so large and busy all the time. I went over to look at a cool stamp collection poster thing that they had. It was something that really interested me at the time. I was there for maybe 2 minutes when all of a sudden my wrist was grabbed and I was pulled away. I looked up and saw a woman who I did not know leading me towards the doorway of the post office. I had no idea who she was, and I was so confused I thought maybe she worked at the post office. But after looking at her, she clearly didn't. She wasn't even looking at me, but just walking towards the exit, grabbing my wrist. The place was pretty crowded, so nobody really seemed to notice. She had a tight grip around my wrist, and as we were almost at the door, I remember finally another woman asked her what she was doing. The woman then stopped and said that she was leaving with her son. The other woman turned to me and asked me if this was my mom, and I said no. The woman must have seen how suspicious this situation looked. The woman who had a hold of my arm then said that I was just being difficult and laughed a little. My mother was still over at the counter at the time,
and the post office was so big and crowded that I could barely see her from where I was, and I'm sure she had no idea what was going on. After the woman who I was with claimed I was in fact her son, she began walking quickly out the doors. I heard the other woman say to wait, but we went out the doors without stopping. After we made it outside, the woman led me directly around to the side of the building and onto the sidewalk. We were walking along the street, and the further we got away from the post office, the more worried I became. We walked for probably about a minute, until I started to hear a little shouting coming from behind us. I could hear the woman who had been questioning me at the post office, and then I heard my mother's voice as well. The woman that I was with began running and telling me to run as well. We were being chased, but I didn't want to run. The woman tried picking me up, but in the process of running, tripped a little, and I fell to the ground. The woman stumbled after bumping into me and nearly fell. She ended up letting go of me at that point and running away while I stayed on the ground. My mother and the other woman from the post office caught up to me quickly and brought me back. The police got called to the post office after that. I remember being told a while later that the lady who had tried to kidnap me was caught. I'm really grateful to the other woman who saw what was going on and questioned it, or I don't know what would have happened. About a year ago, I was at home one rainy day. At the time, I was working from home remotely, so I would be at a desk in the corner of my living room to do all of my work. It was probably like 11 a.m. when I heard a knock coming from my front door. I got up from my desk and walked over to the window looking out to my front door. I looked outside of it and saw that there was a man standing there. He was wearing a postal service uniform and had a large package on the ground next to him and a notepad in his arm. It looked like I had received a rather large package, and I walked to go open the door. But just as I was opening the door, I realized that I didn't think I had ordered anything at all. Maybe this guy had the wrong address. I opened up the door, but not all the way, and saw that it was raining relatively hard outside. The man standing in front of me said he had my package, and I needed to sign for it. I told the man that I didn't think I had ordered anything. I questioned if he had the right address. The man confirmed that yes, it was the right address, and asked if he could come inside out of the rain for me to sign it so the paper wouldn't get wet. He picked up the large box from the ground next to him and started to walk into my house. I told the man that I really didn't think I had ordered anything and asked him what company this package was from. The man started to look annoyed. He said he didn't know what the package was or where it was from. He was just delivering it. For some reason, I just had a bad feeling about it. I didn't want to let the man in my house. And I told him that I knew I didn't order anything, and until I knew what this was, I wouldn't be signing for it. The man started getting upset. He told me that I was causing a great inconvenience, and then started to push my door open to walk inside. I told him to stop, and I basically slammed the door shut in his face, and then locked it. I watched the man then turn and walk away through the pouring rain down to the end of my driveway. That's when I realized that I hadn't seen any sort of mail truck in my driveway or on the street. I kept watching the man through my window, and saw him walk up to a car, parked a little ways down the street. He then tossed the package in the back seat and got inside the car. The car was just a regular gray sedan and not any kind of mail delivery truck. I'm quite confident that if I had let the man inside my house, something bad would have happened, and I'm glad that I trusted my instincts.
This story takes place back when I used to drive a delivery truck for UPS a couple of years ago. The house deliveries were normally pretty easy, but oftentimes I would have to enter apartment buildings as well. A lot of times there would be a desk receptionist and a mailbox area, and I could leave the package with them. Every so often though, I would have to bring the package directly to someone's door, especially if it couldn't fit in their mailbox. There was this one particular delivery where I had to bring a package up to someone's door. It was an older apartment building with no elevator, so I walked up the stairs with my package to the 4th floor and then went to the room number. I had thankfully found it on the directory down on the 1st floor. As I was setting the package down, the door opened, so I stood back up, deciding that I would just hand the person their package. The man who had opened the door had on a muscle shirt with holes in it, whitey-tighties, and nothing else. I was considerably perplexed by the image that was in front of me. To avoid staring at this nearly naked man, I averted my gaze into his apartment. The scene that was before me was quite disturbing. There were multiple bottles of beer as well as wine on the living room table. and in the dimly lit room, I saw what appeared to be a woman who was naked and sleeping. The man, who clearly saw I was staring into his apartment for a quick second, hurriedly slammed the door shut in my face. I wasn't quite sure what I had just seen. During the long walk back down the stairs to my truck, I was pondering what was going on in that apartment. To me, it seemed like potentially something very wrong was going on, but I also thought that it was possibly the man's wife who had passed out or something. I was still thinking about the scenario when I got into my truck and prepared to drive away. As I was pulling away from the apartment building, I saw the same man who I had just given the package to. He was outside the front doors of the apartment, crouched down next to a bush hiding, but he wasn't doing a very good job of it. This further added to my suspicion, so much so that once I had pulled away, I called the cops, letting them know what I had seen. Later that week, I found out that the police had indeed went to the man's apartment and stopped a potential case of the woman being drugged and violated. I suppose that the man had followed me out of the building to see if I would make a phone call at all while I was leaving. I can't imagine what the man would have said or even done to me if I had decided to call the cops as I was still walking out of the building. That was by far the eeriest situation that I've ever been a part of while I was a UPS driver. A few years ago, I moved back to my hometown with my kids after a divorce. About a year after I moved back, I got a job at a local boutique place. My workspace was in the back where the deliveries were and where the clothes were stored before being put out front to sell. Soon after I started working there, I realized all the girls were creeped out by our local FedEx driver. When the girl workers saw the truck pull up outside, they'd usually yell, "He's here." My boss would literally hide in her office so she didn't have to talk to this guy, and it didn't take me long to figure out why. I'm a very friendly person usually, and I like to treat everyone the way I'd want to be treated. This driver, who I'll call Jeff, would come in to drop the boxes off, and he'd always linger. He would make conversation, and his conversations got progressively weird. The first time I met him and introduced myself, he said, "Oh, did you used to work at the funeral home?" It was a little strange to me, but it's a small town, so I just said yes, and that was it. I hadn't given him my last name, so I just figured he remembered my face. One of the next times he was there, he told me that he just dropped off some packages at my house. When I looked at him and asked how he knew where my house was, he just laughed and said, "It's not a big city." It made me feel weird, and when I told my boss about it after he left, she agreed it was weird but just let it go. One of the next times he came in, he made a remark about a big box he delivered to my house. He said, "I know you don't have a big man to get the box inside your house. Do you want me to come and help you get it in the house when you get off of work?" I immediately replied no thanks, and that was the remark that creeped me out fully. Jeff was either watching my house or paying attention to the names in the mail. Either way, it was enough for me to warn my girls not to answer the door if he came to our house. I eventually started doing everything I could to avoid Jeff by trying to take my lunch break around the time he made his delivery at the shop. The last straw was one evening I heard a knock at the door of my house, and then the sound of packages being left on the porch. I waited a minute or so and then went to get the boxes. Jeff was parked in the church parking lot across from my house, watching. As soon as I came out, he grinned and waved, and then started to get out of the truck like he was going to approach my house again. I quickly went back into my house and shut the door. He didn't knock, but his truck was in the parking lot for another 15 minutes or so. My daughter watched him from her bedroom window and told me he kept looking at the house, and I figured he was waiting to see if I'd come back out. I decided to call the local FedEx facility to report it. I explained the whole story, and the manager told me they would look into it and thanked me for letting them know. I figured nothing would be done. A couple of days went by, and I got a call from a manager at the FedEx facility. He told me that Jeff would no longer be a problem and apologized for everything. I assumed maybe they changed his route or something, but the next driver happened to be a high school friend. When I jokingly told him that I was glad he was our new driver and the last guy was kind of a creeper, he informed me that Jeff had gotten fired. The new driver told me that they had confirmed that Jeff was stalking people, all women, and it made my blood run cold. I watched out for him for months afterwards, but thankfully never saw him. It's possible he was just overly friendly, but I don't think so. I used to feel bad that he lost his job, but he crossed too many lines, and obviously FedEx found something out also that was bad enough to fire him. I used to work at FedEx and was a delivery driver. This was many years ago now, but I will never forget it. I drove for them for almost 5 years. It was a pretty good job, and I got paid decent. I've always enjoyed driving and considered myself to be pretty good at it. When I worked for FedEx, I also worked pretty close to the city. I would be assigned to a certain area usually and then deliver packages there. I had a route where I would make anywhere from 60 to 100 deliveries in a day sometimes. Most of it was smaller packages to houses and apartments, and every now and then a large package. My truck was the standard size, so it was kind of big, and at first, driving it in some of these streets was tough. Near the city, it can be a lot of cars parked on the side of the street, and some streets are also very narrow. But eventually, I got used to it and drove everywhere no problem. One time, I was working a little bit later. My route took a while longer than usual, and by now it was like 7 p.m. I was almost done, but still had more stops to make. After stopping and dropping off a package at one residence, I began driving to my next stop. I drove down a narrow street that was pretty quiet. A car was driving behind me at that point, I remember, and I went down a couple of the other streets. Probably 5 minutes later, I turned into a quiet back area of an apartment building. When the car that had been driving behind me turned there as well, I found it strange. I had delivered to this apartment building before, so I knew that packages were delivered in the back. And that was just basically a little more than an alleyway. The building had parking out front, as well as underground parking. It was confusing the first time that I delivered there, but I quickly found out. So I delivered the package, and then got back in my truck to see that the car was still there behind me. It was parked as if it was waiting for me. A 4-door sedan, silver color. I didn't pay much attention to who was driving though. But they had enough space to go around me, so it was sort of weird. When I kept going, they started to drive after me. I was wondering if they were trying to follow me for some reason. I turned out of the street behind the apartment complex, making a right. This road was very narrow, and the side of the apartment was to the right, and a park area with a sidewalk was to the left. All of the cars were parked on the right side of the street on this day. Now, this road was quiet and didn't have anybody else on it other than the parked cars. That is, until I had just started to drive down it, and suddenly a car in front of me that had been parked turned left. The car then stopped, completely blocking the entire road. I had to stop my truck and was wondering what on earth this person was doing. Meanwhile, the other car was still behind me. I was now completely blocked in. After the car in front of me didn't move for like 30 seconds, I sensed trouble. Then 2 of the back doors opened from the car that was in front of me. I saw these guys start to get out and walk towards my truck. It was in that split second that I made a decision and turned my truck to the left and started driving. It was a tight fit, and I went up on the sidewalk just a little bit, but I made it around the car. Luckily for me, the curb was a little lower than some of the other ones. I didn't know if I would make it for a second, but I got around the car and then turned back onto the road. Then I sped up and turned to the right on the next street, which was a little bit busier. The cars remained back there on the other street. After that, I was able to finish my route, which had already been running late. I was watching behind me the whole time, but didn't see those cars again. Looking back, I have to think that was some kind of a setup. I'm still impressed with myself that I was able to maneuver around the car like that. Like I said, I no longer work for FedEx, but I will always remember that night. I'm a delivery driver for Amazon. Several months ago, I had a really weird experience. The route that I was driving went through mostly this one city. And as you know, countless people use Amazon Prime to buy items. So I often found myself delivering to a lot of the same houses time and time again. A lot of them blended together for me because they all looked similar. But there was one house in particular that I remembered. It was in a pretty average neighborhood. The street was quiet and there were lots of houses on both sides. Most of the houses had about the same size front and back yards. I delivered to one house, sort of about halfway down the street. The house had 2 floors and a big tree out front. When I delivered a package there, I would walk up a walkway that was in the middle of the front yard leading to the front step. Then I would set the package on the front step and go back to my truck. but I remember one time delivering there. As I was walking up to the front step, I saw somebody in the top window. There was a man looking out and just staring at me. It was the creepiest thing, because the way he was staring at me was very intense. I saw him walking up and was instantly weirded out by it. After I dropped off the package and walked back, before I got inside my truck, I looked, and he was still staring at me. The guy was tall, thin, and that's about all I could really tell. Several days later, I had another delivery to the same house, and only realized that it was the same one when I saw the guy again. He was in the same place, looking through the window, staring at me the same way as before. The very next day, he had another package, and he did the same thing. I thought this guy was very strange. Then, a few days later, I had another delivery to make there. By now, I knew it was the house, and I was already expecting to see the guy staring at me. I looked up to the window, but he actually wasn't there. That was a nice change of pace. However, as I approached the front door, I saw a piece of paper was taped to it. I read it, and it said, "Please deliver package to back door today. Gate is open." There was then an arrow pointing to the left. I thought this was strange. I wasn't sure why they wanted the package at the back door. But I looked past the weird behavior of the guy and thought maybe it was just a valuable item that I was delivering or something. Maybe one of his packages had been stolen in the past. I walked to the left and saw that at his property, the entire backyard was all fenced in. The fence wrapped all the way around to connect with the ends of his house, and the fence was also about 7 feet high, and not chain link, but a solid material, so you couldn't see inside at all. I walked through the gate, and the backyard was pretty normal looking, just grass and a few trees and plants scattered around. I walked along the side of the house until I got to the back door. I set the package down on the ground right outside of it, and then started heading back for the gate. But when I got there, the gate was now closed. I tried opening it, but I couldn't get it. It was like somebody had locked it from the outside. Then I walked to the other side of the house to see if there was another gate on that side. Sadly, there wasn't. I was walking back to the gate when I saw the man was now standing outside of the back door to his house. He was just staring at me again. My heart started racing. I wasn't sure what to do, so I just said, "I tried going out that gate, but it won't open." The man didn't say anything. He was not staring at me as intense or creepy as before, but he was sure coming across as strange still. He then pointed to his back door, which was already open. He was signaling me to go inside of his house. I really didn't want to, but I also didn't know what else to do. So I walked forward and then went inside. The man then followed me in. When I got inside of his house, it was pitch black almost. Every single window was covered up completely, and all of the lights were off. I just walked straight ahead. The whole time, I was so nervous that something was going to happen, like the guy was going to whack me on the back of the head or something. I could just barely see, but I did see that the front door was ahead. When I had made it there, the man was still walking behind me, but he didn't say or do anything. I reached for the handle of the front door, afraid that it would be locked like the gate, but this one opened up. I made it outside, and then was on his front step. I then walked quickly back to my truck, and when I was almost there, turned and looked behind me. The man was still inside of his house, but standing right inside the door, staring at me. He was smiling the creepiest smile I've ever seen. I got in my truck and drove to my next delivery, trying to calm myself down. When I made it back that day, I begged my boss to change my route. I told him about the crazy guy, and luckily, I was able to change my route with a coworker. I didn't have to go to that guy's house anymore. Several weeks later, I found the coworker who took that part of my route. I asked him if he noticed the guy staring or anything, but he told me that he hadn't noticed. I was glad that maybe the guy stopped doing that, but I also found that strange. It made me wonder if his strange behavior was targeted at me specifically. Looking back, I still don't know what the guy was doing. Why he always stared at me and then locked me in his backyard, I don't know. I still get the creeps thinking back to it. Last year, I was at home one night. I live by myself and have a house in a quiet neighborhood. I was in my living room at 11 o'clock at night watching TV. During this time, I remembered that I looked out the living room window and I saw a UPS truck on the street. It was parked sort of between my front yard and the neighbor's front yard next door. I found this odd, but didn't think too much of it. I kept watching TV until maybe midnight. Then I got tired and decided to go to bed. I got up and turned the light off to the living room. That's when I noticed that the UPS truck was still there. I was wondering why it was parked there. On my street, everybody has a driveway, so there are usually not very many cars parked on the side of the road, if any. I had never seen a UPS truck here at this hour, and I was unaware of any of my neighbors working for them, and it certainly was way too late for a delivery. Still, I just shrugged it off and went to get ready for bed. Several minutes later, I went back to get something and noticed that the truck was still there. I stopped and just looked at it, still curious. But it was at that moment that I actually saw a man get out of the truck. He was wearing a full UPS uniform of brown pants, a brown UPS jacket, and also a UPS hat and sunglasses. It was like he was making his normal deliveries, except it was midnight. The guy was holding an average-sized square box in his hands, and then started walking down the street. Obviously, I kept watching him. He then reached my driveway and started walking up. Now I was getting kind of nervous. I didn't know why he was going to my house. I also hadn't ordered anything recently. He walked up my driveway and then over to the front door. Then he looked around and set the box down. Following this, he reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like some kind of a crowbar. That's my best guess as to what it was. Now this was really concerning. He then took the crowbar object and put it up against the edge of my door. When I saw that, I ran over towards the front door and turned on the outside light. When the light went on, the man concealed his crowbar device back in his jacket. Then he simply turned and started walking away. He calmly walked back to his truck, got inside, and then left. I called the police and told them what happened. About 10 minutes later, when the cops got there, they checked the box that the guy left on my step. It was completely empty, just a regular square cardboard box. I told them everything I could, and they said that they would look out for a UPS truck driving in the area so late. Now, about a week later, I found out that a man was caught in connection to several robberies in my area. I wasn't even aware that other robberies had taken place. It turned out to be the same guy that was at my house. At first, they thought he worked for UPS, but soon found out that he didn't. He had worked for them years prior, but was no longer an employee. I guess he posed as a delivery driver to stake out neighborhoods, and then would return at night. He broke into multiple houses within a mile of mine. No doubt mine would have been the next one. If I hadn't turned that light on when I did, I don't know what would have happened. I now realize that he was probably just sitting there, waiting for me to go to sleep. Why he chose my house, I still don't know, but when I turned the light off, he must have figured that I had gone to bed. I feel very grateful that I dodged that. I'm a mail delivery driver for the post office. It's a job that I really like, and I've done it for many years. But by far, my craziest experience happened about a year ago. As part of my route, I go to several apartment buildings. One in particular is a complex with 4 buildings all right by each other. There's a road between the buildings, and then parking spaces on the side of the road in front of each building. When I deliver there, if there are no spaces, I just have to park kind of in the middle. I try not to block anybody's cars, but sometimes it's kind of close. One time, I went to that apartment and there were no open spaces. I tried to make sure that I wasn't blocking anybody, and then I parked and went inside one of the buildings. I then came back out and delivered the mail to the building across from it. When I got back to my truck, I saw a man standing there, looking angry. When I was walking over to my truck, he already started yelling at me. He was saying that I was in the way and blocking his car. The guy seemed like trouble right away. It seemed as though he might have been on some sort of drugs as well. Anyways, I told him that I left him plenty of space, because I did, but he just kept yelling at me. I told him that I was moving now anyways, and I started walking to go inside of my truck. He followed me there, cursing at me the whole time. There was no reason for him to be so angry. He seemed like just a really angry person in general. I told him to calm down, and I said he had no reason to be so upset, but that was just like adding fuel to the fire. After I got inside my truck, I started to drive away from him. I wasn't even listening to what he was saying. He then went into his car, which was parked at the end, and left. But when he left, he made sure to screech his tires as he sped out of the parking lot. He also came within probably a foot of hitting my truck when he did so, and of course was flipping me off as he passed. I was just glad that he was gone, and then I delivered to the final 2 buildings in the complex and then left. I was really confused as to why the guy was so angry. The next day, I delivered to the same apartment, and I had sort of forgot about it. This time though, there was a parking space that I could use. I parked and went inside of the building to deliver the mail. I was in there for a couple minutes, and when I returned to my truck, saw that it was all messed up. When I delivered mail, I used to have a bad habit of leaving my door open. It was faster, and nobody had done anything before. I know it was dumb, but now it seemed as though somebody had come in and just thrown everything all around. It was all disorganized now, and the mail was out of place. I had a pretty good idea of who had done it also. I was really angry, but tried to reorganize everything. It took a while, and I got behind schedule, but eventually I was able to move on. After this incident, I emailed the management of the apartment building about the guy. I didn't think they would do anything, but thought that I should still let them know. They did respond to me, saying that they would send an email to the residents. Well, sometime the next week, when I was back at that same building, I parked in a space and delivered the mail. After I delivered to the last building in the apartment complex, I returned to see that my tires were slashed. I couldn't believe it. I looked around, and soon saw the same guy. He was standing just outside one of the apartments in a patio area and laughing. I couldn't hold back my anger, and I walked over towards him and started cursing him out. He then got all angry back at me and started threatening me. He said I was lucky he only went after my truck. I realized at that point it was pretty dangerous to provoke this guy, and I walked away. He was still yelling at me as I did. I got back to my truck and called the police. They arrived sometime later and arrested the guy, and the cops and the man seemed to know each other by name, which tells me it was not his first time doing something dumb like this. After that incident, I never saw him again. I found out that he didn't even actually live at that apartment complex, and the place was his ex-girlfriend's. It blows my mind how he could get so angry, but hopefully the guy gets the help that he needs.